My new house felt like a true fresh start. After years in cramped apartments, I finally owned a place. It was a small, cozy home in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and the pride and excitement were immense. The street had beautiful old trees, and most houses held families or older couples who'd lived there for decades. It was the kind of place where everyone waved from their porches, where kids played, and where I hoped to find peace. I spent my weekends tending my yard, meeting neighbors, and settling into a comfortable routine. The house next door was empty when I first moved in, so I had no immediate neighbors. Then, one day, a moving truck arrived. A man, likely in his early 50s, stepped out. He was tall, broad, with a rough beard and cold eyes. He looked like someone used to hard work, and something about his manner made me uneasy. He didn't wave or smile when he saw me watching from my window. He just glanced my way, then went inside. At first, I didn't think much of it. People move all the time. But that cold, distant stare of his stayed with me. A couple of weeks after he settled in, we had our first real interaction. I was outside trimming the bushes along my fence when I noticed him standing on his porch, watching me. He stayed silent, just stood there, arms crossed, his eyes following my every move. "Hey," I called out, forcing a friendly smile, hoping to break the silence. "How's it going?" He didn't answer right away, just stared, as if judging me. Finally, after what felt like forever, he nodded. "You live alone?" he asked, his voice deep and rough. I paused, taken aback by the question. Yeah, just me." He nodded again, his eyes slightly narrowing. "That's good," he mumbled. "Easier that way." I didn't know how to respond, so I just gave a fake laugh and kept trimming. The rest of the afternoon, I felt his gaze, even after he disappeared inside. There was something creepy about his watch, like he was studying me, waiting. That night, in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told myself I was overreacting, letting my mind play trick. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Weeks passed, and my neighbor, John, grew more unsettling. At first, I'd see him pacing his driveway late at night, muttering. He'd leave trash cans out for days, sometimes tossing things into my yard. Once I saw him by the fence, staring at my house in the early morning. But it wasn't just strange acts. Something darker, more menacing, began to seep into my life. One night, I came home to find my mailbox smashed. It was fine when I left, but now it looked like someone had hit it with a bat. I couldn't prove John did it, but I felt he was involved. Things got worse. Some nights I'd hear him yelling outside, though I never saw anyone else. His angry, jumbled shouts would pierce my thin walls, making my skin crawl. Sometimes it sounded like he argued with himself, his voice shifting. I tried to convince myself to talk to him, to calm things, but every time I thought of facing him, that cold, knowing stare in his eyes stopped me. I didn't know what he was capable of, and I wasn't keen to find out. The last straw came one Saturday afternoon. I was on my porch, reading, enjoying the quiet, when I heard glass shatter. Startled, I saw John in his yard, a beer bottle in hand, another broken on the ground between our homes. I stood, ready to speak, when he stared at me. Something in his eyes sent a shiver through me, something truly unhinged. "What's your problem?" he yelled, his voice thick with rage and drink. "You think you're better than me, huh? Sitting there like you don't see me." I froze, my heart racing. I don't know what you mean," I stammered. He stumbled closer, face twisted in fury. "Don't play dumb," he snarled. "I see how you look at me. You think I'm a freak, right?" I was speechless. Every part of me screamed to run inside, lock the doors, call the police. But I stood frozen, my mind racing as he drew near. "Sir, please," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I don't want trouble. Let's just forget it, okay?" He stopped feet away, fists clenched, chest heaving. For a moment, I thought he'd strike me. The air crackled. Then, as quickly as it began, he backed off. "Yeah, sure," he mumbled, turning away. "Forget it." But as he walked back to his house, I knew it wasn't over. The look in his eyes, the anger beneath the surface, meant trouble was coming. After that day, I couldn't shake I tried to live normally, but every time I left my house, every time I went outside, I found myself checking behind me, expecting John to appear. His presence was a dark shadow, making even simple things feel dangerous. The shouting didn't stop. Late at night, I'd hear him outside, screaming at the top of his lungs. Sometimes it was just wild words. Other times he'd yell my name, daring me to come out. I never did. I stayed locked inside, lights off, hoping he wouldn't try to break in. One night, I woke to loud pounding on my front door. My heart raced as I sat up, listening. The pounding was relentless, like someone wanted to break the door. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed 9. The operator sounded calm, but my fear drowned her out. "Someone's at my door," I whispered, my voice barely there. "He's trying to get in." "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Officers are coming." I stayed in my bedroom, huddled against the wall, taking short, panicked breaths. The pounding went on forever, then finally stopped. The silence after was almost worse, my mind racing with what John might do. When police arrived, they found nothing. John was back in his house, lights off. They told me to file a report, but without proof, they couldn't do much. The tension between us peaked a few weeks later. It was late afternoon, and I was getting ready for work when I heard something shatter outside. I rushed to the window and saw John by the fence, a brick in his hand. My car window smashed. That was it. I'd had enough. I grabbed my phone and stormed outside, dialing the police. "What the hell is your problem?" I yelled, my voice shaking with fury and fear. John just stood there, a twisted grin on his face, his eyes glinting with evil. "You think you can call the cops on me?" he sneered. "You think they'll stop me? I've been through worse, and I always win." I stepped back, his words sinking in. He wasn't just mad. He was truly dangerous. I had no idea what he might do. The police arrived fast, but John had gone back inside. They arrested him for property damage, but I knew it wasn't the end. That night, lying in bed, I knew I couldn't stay. Fear had taken over my whole life, turning my home into a prison. I couldn't live with John's constant anger, not knowing what he might do next. The very next morning, I put my house up for sale. I didn't care about money or moving. I just needed to leave. It took a few months, but I found a buyer. I packed my things, locked the door one last time, and left that neighborhood behind. But even now, in my new home, I still can't fully trust my neighbors. I don't think I ever will. When my wife and I moved into our new house, it felt like a dream come true. It was a charming 2-story home, exactly what we wanted. Neighbors were friendly, streets clean, and we had plenty of space for a family. The first weeks were busy unpacking, meeting people, and settling in. Everyone seemed welcoming, and we felt right at home. But one neighbor stood out, Mrs. Hathaway, an elderly woman next door. She was a little bossy, but seemed sweet. On moving day, she came over with a casserole, introducing herself with overly strong cheer. "I've lived here over 30 years, she chirped, her voice high. "I've seen families come and go, but I always welcome the new folks. If you ever need anything at all, just tell me." My wife and I shared polite smiles, thanking her for the food. At first I saw it as simple neighborly kindness, but in the following days, Hathaway became a constant fixture. Every time my wife went out to water plants or get mail, there she was, waving and calling out, asking about us, or giving advice on everything from plants to house upkeep. At first it was harmless, even a bit sweet, but soon it felt intrusive, like she always knew our movements, even when we just wanted peace in our own home. Weeks later, Mrs. Hathaway's visits grew more frequent. She'd show up at strange hours, sometimes early morning, other times late night. She would knock on our door uninvited, bringing random items, fresh cookies, garden tools, magazines. Initially we didn't mind, thinking perhaps she was lonely. But then one night, she knocked at almost 10 p.m. My wife and I had just settled in for a movie, and the sudden knock startled us. I opened the door to find Mrs. Hathaway holding muffins. "I thought you might like these," she said, smiling sweetly. Yet something in her gaze made my skin crawl. I forced a polite smile and thanked her, though my voice held clear annoyance. My wife gave me a look. I knew she felt it too. We wanted a quiet night, and her uninvited visit felt like a trespass. After she left, I turned to my wife. "This is getting a little weird, right?" She nodded, her brow furrowed. "She's just being friendly, I guess. But showing up this late is odd." Over the next few days, the visits kept happening. Sometimes she'd knock just to ask if we needed anything. Other times she'd bring strange things like old books or trinkets. It wasn't the gifts, but the endless constant attention that bothered us. One Saturday, my wife and I were gardening. Mrs. Hathaway, of course, watched from her porch. Every time we glanced up, she was there, her eyes fixed on us, not even trying to hide it. After a while, my wife whispered, "She's creeping me out." I couldn't stand it. Something felt wrong, like she was forcing her way into our life. We decided to politely keep our distance when she came over, but it didn't work. One evening, we arrived home to find Mrs. Hathaway standing in our backyard. She wasn't doing anything, just looking around as if it were her own. I froze, unsure what to do. My wife gripped my arm, whispering, "What is she doing here?" her voice full of fear. I stepped out and called, "Mrs. Hathaway, what are you doing?" She turned, a wide smile on her face. "Oh, I was just checking the garden. I thought you might need help with those roses." My patience broke. "You can't just come into our yard like that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We appreciate your help, but this is our home. You must respect our privacy." For a moment her smile faded, her eyes grew dark, and her face became unreadable. But then, just as fast, she was back to her sweet, smiling self. "Oh, I didn't mean any harm, dear," she said softly. "I just want to help." That night, my wife and I talked for hours. We didn't want to be rude, but her actions crossed a line. It wasn't just friendly. It felt like she was trying to control every part of our lives. We decided to set some boundaries. The next time she visited, I made it clear that while we valued her kindness, we needed our space. She seemed to understand, nodding and smiling, as usual. But that wasn't the end. A few days later, my wife came to me with horror on her face. "You need to see this," she said, her voice shaking. She took me to the living room. While dusting, she'd found a small, old-fashioned camera, hidden behind books. I stared, my mind racing. "Where did this come from?" I asked, already knowing. "There's more," she whispered. She showed me 2 more cameras, one in the kitchen, one in the hall. They were tiny, almost hidden. My stomach twisted. Mrs. Hathaway had been in our house. She'd planted cameras, watching us, recording us. I felt sick. Without a word, I grabbed them and stormed next door. I pounded on her door, my anger boiling. When she opened it, I held up the cameras, my hands shaking. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. Her face didn't change. She wasn't surprised, didn't seem worried. She just smiled that same creepy smile. "I was just looking out for you," she said calmly, "making sure you were safe." I couldn't believe it. "You were spying on us." She tilted her head, her smile steady. "I care about you, dear. I'm just trying to protect you." I said nothing else. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. Inside, I called the police. They came and took my statement, but Mrs. Hathaway wasn't arrested. There was no clear proof she'd placed the cameras, nothing to directly link her to invading our privacy. All we had were suspicions, and that wasn't enough. But the fear didn't fade. It grew. Mrs. Hathaway stopped visiting, no longer brought casseroles or tools. Yet, we could feel her presence, just beyond our walls. Every time we went outside, we'd see her through her curtains, watch. Police suggested security cameras, but even that didn't stop the creeping feeling that she was always there, always watching. One night, my wife woke screaming. I rushed to her side, heart pounding. She said she'd seen someone in the doorway, but when I checked, no one was there. That was the last straw. The next morning, we packed and left the house. We stayed in a hotel, trying to decide what to do. I knew we couldn't live like this, trapped in a house that felt like a prison. Weeks later,
We sold the house. We never looked back. It's been over a year since we left that neighborhood. I don't know what Mrs. Hathaway wanted, and I don't want to know. All I know is she was obsessed with us, obsessed with controlling every bit of our lives. I'd lived in my house for about a year before odd things started happening. Nothing major at first, just small details. I'd come home and find the living room blinds slightly open, though I was sure I'd closed them. Sometimes the kitchen light was on, even though I clearly remembered turning it off before leaving for work. I blamed it on forgetfulness. Working long hours and living alone made it easy to miss small things. But after a while, these little incidents began to stack up. One day, I came home after a very long shift to find the front door slightly open. Not enough to cause immediate panic, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. I stood on the porch, staring, wondering if I'd left it ajar that morning. My neighborhood was usually quiet and safe, where people left doors unlocked without a thought. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. I pushed the door open, stepping inside. The house was silent, just as I'd left it. Everything looked normal, but the unease stayed. I checked windows, double-checked locks, telling myself it was just tiredness, or maybe I'd rushed out. But a few days later, it happened again. This time I was positive. I'd locked the door. I remembered standing in the hallway, keys in hand, turning the deadbolt before leaving for work. Yet, when I came home that evening, the door was unlocked. My heart sank as I stood on the porch, staring, my pulse quickening. I tried to make sense of it, thinking maybe the lock was faulty, or I hadn't turned it fully. I stepped inside with care, my senses sharp, listening for anything out of place. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked through each room, checking windows, checking the back door, trying to calm myself. That's when I saw it. The kitchen drawers where I kept the silverware were open. Not wide open, but just enough to show someone had rummaged through them. I froze. I'd been rushing, but there was no way I'd left those drawers open. I always shut them. I walked closer, my eyes scanning the counter. Nothing seemed missing, but the chilling feeling wouldn't leave. Someone had been in my house. As days passed, the odd things continued. I'd find items slightly out of place. A chair pulled from the dining table. A book moved. The shower curtain pulled back when I knew I'd left it closed. It was like someone was going through my things. Not stealing, just messing with the order of my home. I became paranoid. Every time I left for work, I'd check the locks, double-checking they were secure. I'd close every window, draw the curtains tight, and even began placing small objects strategically, so I'd know if anyone had entered. It wasn't long before I suspected my neighbor. He lived next door, and though he seemed friendly, something about him made me uneasy. He was always outside, tinkering in his garage, or sitting on his porch, watching. His small talk felt invasive, like he knew too much about me. He'd comment on when I left, when I came home, when I had visitors. At first I thought he was just overly friendly, but now, I wasn't so sure. One evening, I came home to find my bedroom lights on. I never left them on, not even when rushing. My heart pounded as I slowly went through the house, checking each room, trying to stay calm. Everything was in place, except for the bedroom. There, on my nightstand, was a small trinket I didn't recognize, a keychain with a tiny flashlight. It wasn't mine. I hadn't bought it, and I hadn't had guests in weeks. I stared at it, my mind racing. Had Frank been in my house? Was he playing games? The thought made my skin crawl. I grabbed the keychain and marched next door, adrenaline rushing. Frank sat on his porch, sipping a beer. As usual, he smiled as I approached, but his smile felt wrong, making me want to turn and leave. "Evening," he said, leaning back. "Everything okay?" I held up the keychain. "Did you leave this in my house?" Frank looked at it, his face blank for a second, then chuckled. "I've no idea what you're talking about. Someone's been in my house," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "And I think it's you." He raised his hands, pretending to surrender. Whoa, calm down. I don't know what's happening in your house, but it's not me. Maybe you're just forgetting things. Stress can do that. You know." I wanted to believe him, but his smirk, the way his eyes held my gaze too long, told me everything. The next day, I bought security cameras. If Frank was breaking in, I would catch him. I placed them around the house, covering every angle. That night, I slept with my phone beside me, ready to check footage. For a few nights, all was quiet. No signs of entry. Nothing missing. Nothing out of place. I began to relax, thinking maybe I'd scared Frank off by confronting him. But then, one night, the camera's motion detector went off. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, waking me. I grabbed it, my heart pounding, and opened the app. The grainy video showed the side of my house, dark shadows on the lawn. Then I saw him. Frank. He was crouching near the side window, the one I always locked. He was trying to open the latch. My stomach twisted with fear and rage as I watched. He had been doing this all along. I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I explained to the operator. As I spoke, I kept watching the screen. Frank finally pushed the window open. He slipped inside with practiced ease, like he'd done it many times. I didn't wait. I grabbed a baseball bat from under my bed and crept down the hall, my heart pounding. My mind raced with fear and anger. How dare he enter my home, my space, and act like he owned it? I heard him before I saw him. His footsteps were soft on the carpet as he moved through the house. He was in the kitchen, back to me, rummaging through drawers. Without thinking, I swung the bat. It connected with a sickening thud, and Frank fell to the ground. I stood over him, shaking, adrenaline rushing. As distant sirens grew louder, police arrived fast, pulling Frank to his feet and handcuffing him. I watched from the doorway as they led him to the squad car. He said nothing, just glared with those cold, calculating eyes. Officers took my statement, reviewed the video, confirming what I already knew. Frank had been breaking in for weeks, maybe longer. He was charged with trespassing and breaking and entering. Even after Frank's arrest, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I changed locks, added more cameras, and installed a security system. My home, once safe, now felt like a cage, a place where I was always on edge, waiting for another intrusion. I moved out a few months later. I couldn't live there anymore, not with the memories of Frank and how he invaded my space. I found a new place, a small apartment in the city, where I could vanish among the crowds. But even now, I still feel that same unease. I still check locks 3 times before leaving, and I still scan the cameras every night before bed. Moving into my new place filled me with excitement. It fit my budget and felt like a step forward. I spent the first weeks unpacking and decorating. The house wasn't huge, but it had a yard, and the neighborhood seemed peaceful. I quickly settled into a routine: work, home, relax, repeat. It felt like everything I'd wanted. Soon, though, I noticed him. My neighbor, an older man directly across the street. He was always there. When I pulled into the driveway after work, he was on his porch or in his yard. At first I thought it was chance. Maybe he was retired, or just liked being outdoors. But then I noticed something strange. No matter when I came home, early, late, or on weekends, he was always there. I'd park my car, and there he'd be, sitting on his porch, staring straight at my house. His gaze was unsettling, steady. It wasn't just a friendly neighbor's glance. It felt purposeful, sharp. He never waved, never smiled, just watched. At first I tried to ignore it. People are weird. Maybe he was lonely, or didn't know how creepy he seemed. But the more I saw him, the more his constant presence gnawed at me. The first time I told a friend, they laughed it off. Old people get bored, they said. He probably just has nothing better to do. That made sense, and I tried to believe it. But as days passed, his watching became impossible to ignore. One evening, after a long day, I came home to find him in his usual spot, on his porch with coffee. The sun was setting. I tried to ignore him as I got out of my car, keys jingling. I felt his eyes on me as I walked to my door, but this time his stare felt sharper, more intense. I quickly glanced over my shoulder to confirm. He was standing now. I froze, my heart beating faster. He said nothing, just stood there, eyes locked on me, face blank. I rushed inside, locking the door, trying to shake the feeling. But even inside, the unease stayed. I went through my normal routine, making dinner, watching TV, trying to relax, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. Later that night, getting ready for bed. I peeked out the window. The street was dark, lit only by dim lamps. His house was pitch black, but I knew he was in there somewhere, likely still watching. Things grew worse over the next weeks. At first, it was just the feeling of being watched from across the street, but then I saw things in my own yard, small things out of place. A garden hose moved, footprints in the dirt near the house, the back gate open when I knew I'd closed it. One Saturday morning, while mowing my lawn, I felt that familiar prickle on my neck. I looked. There he was, standing at his driveway's edge, watching me again. I paused, my grip tightening on the lawnmower handle. I tried ignoring him for weeks, hoping he'd understand and leave me alone, but I couldn't take it anymore. I cut the engine, then walked to the edge of my yard. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound calm. "Can I help you with something?" He didn't answer, just stood there, staring. "Look," I said, growing frustrated. "I've noticed you watching me a lot. Is there a problem?" Still, he said nothing. The silence was crushing. I opened my mouth to speak again, but he just turned and walked away, disappearing inside his house without a word. I stood dumbfounded, heart racing. It was as if I didn't exist to him. From then on, I started avoiding my front yard. I spent more time inside, keeping the blinds shut, only going out when necessary. Every time I drove home, I'd check his porch to see if he was watching. Sometimes he was, sometimes not, but the feeling never left. Things worsened. One night, I woke to footsteps outside my window. It was past midnight, and the house was silent. At first, I thought I imagined it. I lay still, listening, my heart thumping. There it was again, the soft crunch of gravel, like someone walking along my house. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my hand shaking as I turned on the flashlight. I didn't want to look, didn't want to know, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I pulled back the curtains. For a second, I thought the yard was empty, bathed in faint street light. But then I saw him. He was standing in my yard.
Yeah.
I gasped, stumbling back, dropping the phone. In my panic, he was right there, less than 10 feet from my window, just standing, watching. I fumbled for my phone, my mind racing with fear. I called the police, my voice shaking, as I tried to explain. "He's in my yard," I whispered, my heart pounding. "My neighbor. He's outside watching me." The operator assured me officers were on the way, but minutes felt like hours. I stayed hidden in the corner, clutching the phone, eyes glued to the window. But when police arrived and searched the yard, he was gone. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing to prove he'd been there. I knew what I'd seen, but without evidence, police couldn't do anything. They took my statement and left, but the fear stayed. I tried to live normally, but paranoia had taken over. Every night, I double-checked locks, made sure windows were closed, and left lights on everywhere. I couldn't shake the feeling he was always there, always watching. One evening, I came home late from work, exhausted and stressed. I parked in the driveway, the familiar dread creeping over me as I looked at his house. His porch light was on, but no sign of him. I rushed inside, locking the door, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For a moment, I thought maybe tonight would be different. Maybe I'd get some peace. But then I saw it. On the kitchen table, where I always left my keys, was a note. A small crumpled piece of paper, folded neatly. I froze. I hadn't left anything on that table, I was certain. With trembling hands, I unfolded the note. The words were scrawled in shaky, almost childish handwriting. "I see you." My breath caught. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair in my panic. My mind raced. How had he gotten in? How long had he been in my house? I hadn't seen any sign of a break-in, but the note was undeniable. I grabbed my phone and called the police again. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't live like this. The police came, took my statement, and searched the house from top to bottom. But again, they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no evidence. It was like he knew exactly how to leave. No trace. And what truly terrified me was that I had no idea who I was dealing with. I packed my things that night and left. I couldn't stay in that house another moment, not with the constant feeling of being watched, of being hunted. I stayed with a friend for weeks while I found a new place, far from that neighborhood, far from. I never saw my creepy neighbor again, but the memory of his cold, watching eyes has never left me, and I'll never forget how he made me feel. If these chilling neighbor stories left you feeling uneasy, please hit that like button and subscribe for more spooky horror tale. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. You won't want to be surprised by the next scare. Have your own terrifying neighbor experience. Share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the scariest things are closer than you think. I'll see you in the next nightmare.